Hey guys, tonight we're diving into a world of marble columns, bustling streets, and absolutely no Wi-Fi. Ancient Rome. Forget gladiator glam and togas that magically stay put. Imagine waking up on a stiff bed of reeds or straw, tangled in itchy wool blankets, your dreams rudely interrupted by street noise and the faint smell of yesterday's fish sauce. You probably wouldn't survive long here. Spoiler, it's messy, loud, and let's be honest, your sandal game wouldn't cut it. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And go ahead, let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what the local time is. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You open your eyes to the soft gray of pre-dawn, vaguely aware of voices already drifting from the street below. You try to stretch, but the narrow bed resists, your joints aching from the unforgiving surface. Forget memory foam. This is straw packed into a wooden frame that squeaks every time you roll over. You sit up, your spine crackling a morning complaint. No alarms, no clocks, just a grumbling stomach and the distant crowing of a confused rooster. You rub your face, careful to avoid the gritty residue of yesterday's sweat and street dust. Washing regularly isn't really a thing here. Sure, Romans love their baths, but daily hygiene at home? Optional at best. Your feet touch the cold, uneven stone floor, and you shiver a little. It's surprisingly chilly in your tiny, dimly lit apartment. Insulas, as they're called here. Think cramped studio apartments, but less charming and definitely less private. The walls are thin, the ceiling leaks a little when it rains, and your neighbors' morning arguments drift effortlessly through every crack. You shuffle toward your makeshift wash basin, a bowl of cold water set on a small wooden stool. No soap, just water. You splash your face quickly, feeling fresher in theory, but mostly just colder. Dressing for the day is its own special torture. If you're a man, welcome to the daily wrestling match with your toga. Picture an enormous sheet of wool, about 15 feet long, designed specifically to frustrate you into tears. You wrap it clumsily around your body, one arm awkwardly pinned at your side, hoping it doesn't slip off mid-conversation. Romans considered the toga a status symbol. You consider it a burden. If you're a woman, things aren't much easier. Layers of linen and wool, pinned intricately at the shoulders and wrapped tightly around your waist. It's hot, heavy, and you're constantly repinning because ancient safety pins, fibulae, are notoriously unreliable. You sigh as you fix your garments yet again, silently cursing whoever invented fashion. Now that you're semi-dressed, you pause to glance around your tiny home. Furniture is minimal, just a stool or two, a chest for clothes, maybe a low table. No closets, no mirrors. Though if you're wealthy, you might have a polished bronze plate to check your reflection. You aren't wealthy, of course, so you rely on your roommate's brutal honesty to know if your hair is sticking up oddly. Speaking of roommates, personal space doesn't exist here. You share this room with at least 2 other people, probably family, possibly strangers. Privacy? That's a modern luxury. You've likely spent your night dodging someone's elbow or listening to loud, snoring inches from your ear. And forget sleeping in. If one person wakes up, everyone wakes up. As you move around, you notice a rat scurry away into the corner. You sigh and remind yourself it's better than cockroaches, though not by much. Vermin are constant companions in Rome's densely packed tenements. You wave vaguely at the rat, half-heartedly threatening eviction. Outside your apartment, the city is already wide awake, vibrating with noise. Street vendors shout their goods: fish, vegetables, questionable sausages, and neighbors argue passionately about everything from politics to laundry. You hear pots clanging, children screaming, and dogs barking. Always dogs barking. Breakfast is a brief, disappointing affair. You reach for stale bread, likely baked 3 days ago, which requires serious jaw strength to chew. You dip it in garum, the Roman condiment of choice, a pungent, fermented fish sauce beloved by Romans, but that tastes exactly how it sounds: salty, fishy, and intensely strange to modern palates. You choke it down, wishing desperately for coffee or tea or literally anything else. Water, however, is risky. Romans knew enough to boil or water down wine, but hygiene wasn't exactly rigorous. You take your chances. You glance outside your window, squinting at the first streaks of pink and gold touching the horizon. It's beautiful, if you ignore the trash-strewn alleyway and the stray donkey relieving itself in plain view. You steel yourself for the day. Because in Rome, survival isn't guaranteed. It's earned, fought for daily, with every step through muddy streets and every careful word spoken. And today, you're definitely going to stub your toe on one of those uneven paving stones. It's inevitable. But for now, you take one last moment to breathe. You whisper a small prayer to any god still listening, and then you step into the bustling chaos that is your new Roman reality. Good luck. You'll need it. You leave your tiny apartment behind, stepping onto narrow stairs that creak threateningly with each cautious footfall. The staircase winds down like a drunken serpent, uneven stones worn smooth by thousands of weary feet. You grip the wall for balance, fingers brushing against graffiti, someone's hastily scratched insults aimed at the landlord. Romans, you quickly realize, have always been salty. Outside, Rome greets you with an aggressive hug of noise and smells: baking bread mingled with sewage, fresh herbs battling with donkey dung. The streets here are more obstacle course than avenue, narrow and crowded, choked with carts and livestock. You step carefully around a puddle that definitely isn't rainwater. You glance upwards, mindful of what Romans euphemistically call the reign of Jupiter. This charming phrase refers to chamber pots emptied from upper-story windows without warning. You narrowly dodge such a blessing now, glaring up at a giggling child perched by the window. You make a silent vow to always carry an umbrella, even though those haven't been invented yet. Dressing correctly in Rome is crucial. You've got your toga on, but keeping it tidy is another story. Imagine constantly adjusting a bedsheet as you walk down a crowded street, struggling to look dignified while wrestling wool. Romans judge harshly. A sloppy toga equals sloppy character. You desperately hope today your toga doesn't decide to betray you publicly. Women don't have it easier. You see them passing, heads elegantly held high, their long tunics draped gracefully, and you wonder how they keep the hems clean in streets that seem to delight in filth. Their hair, elaborately coiled and pinned, is an architectural marvel, but you also spot a woman discreetly readjusting her garment, and you nod sympathetically. Fashion is a daily battle here. Around you, street vendors shout offers and insults with equal enthusiasm. Bread sellers promise fresh loaves, you're skeptical. Vegetable merchants loudly claim divine intervention in their produce's quality, and sausage makers enthusiastically describe meats you'd rather not think about. The noise is constant, a wall of sound punctuated by the occasional donkey braying in protest. Your stomach growls. Breakfast wasn't satisfying, but street food in Rome is a gamble. Sure, You might find fresh figs or honey pastries if you're lucky. But you're more likely to end up with something gritty, bland, or questionably sourced. You eye a cart offering mystery meat pies and wisely keep walking. The crowd surges around you, merchants pushing carts, porters balancing enormous baskets on their heads, children darting between legs like tiny pickpockets. Speaking of pickpockets, Rome is infamous for them. You clutch your small leather pouch tightly, suspicious of everyone. A small child bumps into you, and you immediately check your coin pouch. Still there, thankfully. You glare anyway. They grin innocently, scampering off. You're pretty sure you've just narrowly avoided being robbed by a 7-year-old. A mainstream historical truth. Ancient Rome was notorious for crime and petty theft, especially in crowded public spaces. Nighttime streets were even worse. Romans relied heavily on locked doors, barking guard dogs, and personal vigilance, because the city guards rarely intervened in everyday crime. You're essentially on your own here, armed only with suspicion and luck. The alleyways are narrow, and every doorway seems crowded with shouting arguments. Two men debate fiercely about the proper price of cabbage. Another pair passionately discusses the latest gladiator match, as if their lives depended on it. Romans debate everything, loudly and publicly, preferably in the middle of your path. You step awkwardly around their gesturing arms, trying not to lose your footing. There's something distinctly Roman about public life. It's loud, messy, and absolutely impossible to avoid. You can't retreat into earbuds or pretend to read a phone screen. You're here, caught up in a whirlwind of shouting, smells, and unpredictable donkey crossings. A quirky historical tidbit. Romans were famously superstitious, avoiding left turns at important times and paying close attention to sneezes as omens. If someone sneezes to your right, it's good luck. To your left, disaster looms. You hear someone sneeze loudly to your left, and you silently groan. Just your luck. You press on, rounding a corner to find yourself near a public fountain. The city provides these freely, water gushing from stone mouths shaped like lions or dolphins. Citizens line up with clay jugs, chatting casually about politics or gossip as they wait their turn. You hesitate. Water sources aren't always clean, but thirst wins. You cup your hands beneath the stream, taking a tentative sip. It's slightly gritty, but cool and refreshing. You drink deeply, momentarily forgetting caution. Nearby, an orator stands atop a box, passionately shouting about taxes or senators or something equally tedious. A small crowd listens, occasionally shouting back. Democracy here is messy, confrontational, and unfiltered. Romans love debate almost as much as spectacle. As you watch, you realize the day ahead won't get easier. Every street is an exercise in endurance, every interaction a careful negotiation. Your feet already ache, your toga threatens rebellion, and the sounds of Rome echo relentlessly around you. You pause for a moment in the shade of an awning, catching your breath. Rome's chaos swirls around you, indifferent yet vibrant. It's exhausting, overwhelming, and strangely exhilarating. For now, though, you take a quiet breath, preparing yourself for whatever unexpected challenge Rome throws at you next. Because surviving here means constantly adapting, and you're definitely going to need more than luck to last until sundown. Breakfast in ancient Rome is far from glamorous. Forget avocado toast or fluffy pancakes. You get porridge, and not the cozy kind. Your morning meal is simple, practical, and more than a bit bland. You settle into a low wooden stool at a street-side stall. bowl handed over by a vendor whose hands look permanently gritty from the millstone. Your breakfast is pulse, a boiled grain mush, typically made from wheat or barley. It's thick, slightly lumpy, and has a tendency to stick in your throat if you're not careful. You lift a wooden spoon, sighing softly at the beige lump of nutrition sitting sadly in your bowl. There's no sugar here, no honey. At least, not in your budget. Sweetness is for rich people. To make matters worse, you add a dash of garum, a fermented fish sauce beloved by Romans but deeply confusing to modern taste buds. Garum was to ancient Romans what ketchup is today. They put it on literally everything. But unlike ketchup, garum smells aggressively fishy, salty, and, honestly, a little suspicious. You drip a careful amount onto your porridge, stirring slowly, hoping you haven't ruined your meal entirely. Your first bite is challenging. The grains are gritty, the fish sauce overwhelming. You chew slowly, grimacing, and try to focus on nutrition rather than taste. It's filling, at least, enough to get you through the morning's labor. Breakfast in Rome is more survival tactic than culinary experience. As you eat, people jostle past you, shouting greetings or curses in equal measure. Your dining spot is directly beside a busy thoroughfare, meaning you eat amidst constant noise, donkeys braying, vendors calling out prices, and carts rattling across uneven cobblestones. A small dog begs by your feet, hopeful eyes fixed on your porridge. You briefly consider offering him some, then realize even dogs probably hate garum. Mainstream historical truth: Romans generally ate 3 meals a day: jentaculum, breakfast; prandium, midday snack; and cena, evening meal. But breakfast was rarely elaborate for common folk. It was usually quick, practical food, eaten standing or sitting on benches near food stalls. The richer Romans might enjoy bread dipped in wine or honey. You, unfortunately, are neither rich nor particularly lucky today. Beside you, a small child picks at his bowl of porridge, clearly unhappy. His mother scolds him gently, reminding him that food isn't for enjoyment, it's fuel. You silently agree. Roman meals were functional, designed to sustain heavy workloads rather than to delight taste buds. You push another spoonful into your mouth, swallowing hard. Around you, men and women hurry past, already absorbed in their daily routines. Bakers rush trays of bread toward the market, weaving expertly through traffic. A nearby vendor loudly advertises fresh figs, and you briefly daydream about biting into something sweet and juicy. But figs are expensive. You return reluctantly to your porridge, resigned. Across the street, a small group of slaves shuffle past, carrying heavy baskets of fruit or grain. They wear simple tunics, eyes downcast, expressions weary. Ancient Rome is a deeply hierarchical society. Status defines everything, including breakfast. Their meal is probably even more basic than yours, if they get one at all. Quirky historical tidbit: Roman cuisine, even at humble meals, often involved strange pairings, like eggs seasoned with honey, cheese dipped in vinegar, or even fruit sprinkled with pepper. Your porridge suddenly seems less odd, but you're still grateful no one handed you eggs drizzled with honey and pepper today. Finishing your porridge, you rinse your bowl at a nearby fountain, swirling water through it before handing it back to the vendor. The Romans didn't use disposable tableware. Everything was reused. Hygiene wasn't exactly stellar, but at least you weren't contributing to litter. You linger briefly, savoring a quiet moment before the chaos of the day truly begins. Nearby, a man argues passionately with a merchant about the quality of olives. Romans argue about everything, even breakfast. It's their favorite pastime, second only to attending the baths or gladiator games. Your stomach is full now, if unsatisfied, and you push away from your stool, stretching briefly. The streets are filling quickly. You glance at your toga, making sure it remains properly wrapped and not embarrassingly askew. You sigh in relief, still decent. You check your money pouch, ensuring no nimble fingers emptied it while you were distracted by fishy porridge. Everything seems intact. The pickpockets haven't started their day quite yet. Or perhaps they simply took pity on your breakfast choices. With breakfast done, Rome fully wakes around you. Shops opening, carts moving faster, conversations louder. You join the flow, stepping back into the bustling street, mentally preparing for the hours ahead. Breakfast in ancient Rome might not be glamorous or even tasty, but it's enough. It fills your stomach, gives you strength, and keeps you going through another day. That's all it ever promised to do. Anything else, flavor, enjoyment, culinary delight, is an unexpected luxury, a surprise gift when fortune occasionally smiles your way. Today, fortune offered only garum. You shrug. Maybe lunch will be better, but probably not. Stepping into Rome's streets is like diving headfirst into a crowded swimming pool. Except the pool is filled with shouting merchants, squealing pigs, and at least one donkey who's taken personal offense to your presence. Your morning journey through the city isn't just a walk. It's a full-on sensory assault, a test of reflexes and patience. And spoiler, your patience isn't going to last long. You glance down at your sandals, already dusty from the cobbled roads. Romans loved their paved roads, engineering marvels really, but only when maintained. And right now, maintenance seems low on the list. Stones are uneven, cracked, and often slippery. One wrong step and you're nursing a bruised ankle or a stubbed toe. You move carefully, mindful that twisting an ankle in ancient Rome means limping for weeks. No aspirin, no ice packs, just endless lectures about walking more carefully. The streets themselves are narrow, crowded, and cluttered. Buildings lean so closely toward each other, you swear you could reach out and shake hands across balconies. This architectural coziness means sunlight rarely reaches street level. Shadows stretch long, making the city feel eternally twilight lit. Atmospheric, perhaps, but mainly just gloomy and claustrophobic. Adding to the charm, Romans toss garbage directly into the streets. Food scraps, broken pottery, and questionable puddles that you carefully avoid. Occasionally, you glimpse movement in these piles of refuse. Rats, of course. Probably cockroaches, too. You sigh, stepping gingerly around a heap that might be cabbage, might be vomit. Who knows? A mainstream historical truth. Ancient Roman sanitation varied dramatically. While they were famous for aqueducts and public baths, ordinary city streets were rarely cleaned. Waste was often thrown directly into gutters, left to decay until heavy rains washed it away, hopefully. Until then, the streets were breeding grounds for disease and pests. The smell is constant, an unpleasant mix of spoiled fish, sweaty bodies, and animals. The Romans used incense and perfumes liberally, not just as decoration, but as a desperate attempt to mask the relentless odor of urban life. But you don't have perfume today, just grit and determination. You walk quickly, dodging between pedestrians, carts, and livestock. A donkey stubbornly blocks your path, munching calmly on an abandoned cabbage leaf. You mutter threats it completely ignores, eventually squeezing past its broad backside, hoping it doesn't kick. Thankfully, the donkey seems bored rather than malicious. Nearby, a street vendor aggressively hawks his wares: olives, figs, and sausages of questionable origin. He waves samples toward passing faces, enthusiastically describing their freshness. You wrinkle your nose, skeptical. Romans had strict food standards in theory, but street food often ignored these standards entirely. Buyer beware isn't just good advice here, it's survival instinct. Another vendor loudly advertises pottery, claiming his bowls are unbreakable. As he speaks, a bowl slips from his grasp, shattering spectacularly. You suppress a smirk, weaving carefully around the fragments. Romans have always been excellent at marketing, if not honesty. Your attention briefly shifts to a street corner fortune teller calling out prophecies for small coins. Romans loved superstition. Omens, dreams, predictions guided their lives. Today's fortune teller promises wealth, power, and a miraculous cure for baldness. You roll your eyes but notice a small crowd gathering, eager to believe. Superstition is Rome's unofficial religion. A fringe historical tidbit: ancient Romans paid close attention to street omens. Tripping in public was considered a bad sign. Birds flying overhead could indicate fortunes changing, and even sneezes were meticulously analyzed. As you walk, someone loudly sneezes behind you. You freeze momentarily. Good omen or bad? Too complicated. You decide it's safer just to ignore it and keep walking. Traffic snarls near intersections. No traffic lights, no stop signs, just chaotic convergence. Pedestrians, carts, animals, and soldiers all mingle awkwardly, jostling for right-of-way. Occasionally, arguments erupt. Two men shouting furiously about who bumped into whom. Romans were notorious for their quick tempers and willingness to settle disputes publicly. You hurry past, avoiding eye contact. No need to join today's drama. At one particularly tight intersection, a cart laden with enormous clay jars gets stuck. The driver screams orders. Bystanders shout conflicting advice. A jar tips dangerously, threatening disaster. You hold your breath, sidestepping cautiously. Disaster narrowly avoided. For now. You finally reach a wide plaza, momentarily relieved. Space opens around you. Sunlight actually reaches street level. The Forum stands ahead, its columns tall and imposing. Romans gather here daily to gossip, debate, and handle civic business. You sigh, knowing your journey isn't over. The Forum is its own unique chaos. But before you step into that next challenge, you pause briefly, catching your breath. Around you, Rome pulses with relentless energy. Noise, smells, and constant movement. It's exhausting, overwhelming, occasionally thrilling and perpetually messy. And you know tomorrow morning you'll do it all over again. The garbage, the dodging, the donkey confrontations. Because in ancient Rome, daily life is a constant negotiation with chaos. Every street corner holds another surprise, usually unpleasant, and your survival depends on quickly learning to adapt. You take one final deep breath, step carefully over a suspicious puddle, and walk forward into the Forum's clamoring crowds. You'll need all your patience today, plus maybe a little luck, to last another hour in this beautifully chaotic city. After navigating Rome's chaotic streets, your next stop isn't optional. It's practically required: the bathhouse. Romans took bathing very seriously. It wasn't just hygiene, it was social obligation, community center, and wellness spa combined. But for you, a tired, slightly anxious newcomer, it feels more like a mandatory, awkward, and somewhat humiliating ritual. You approach the bathhouse, an imposing stone building bustling with activity. Men and women stream in and out, chatting loudly, laughing, arguing about politics or gladiators. Already your anxiety spikes. Public bathing, naked, with strangers. You swallow nervously. Inside, the first thing that hits you is the heat. Oppressive, moist, scented faintly with sweat and oils. Romans loved their hot baths, using sophisticated heating systems known as hypocausts to warm floors and walls. It feels like stepping into a giant sauna. You immediately regret wearing your heavy wool toga, already sweaty from the streets. You shuffle toward the changing room, known as the apoditarium, awkwardly eyeing the other patrons undressing casually. You glance around for a private cubicle. Nothing. Romans, you quickly realize, had absolutely no concept of modesty. Everyone strips openly, chatting cheerfully, entirely unbothered. You sigh deeply, fumbling with your toga, awkwardly unwinding yards of heavy wool. It tangles stubbornly around your limbs. Nearby, an elderly man glances at you, eyebrow raised in amusement. You try to smile back confidently, but mostly just blush furiously. Once undressed, you wrap yourself nervously in a small towel. Romans used them sparingly, and enter the tepidarium, the warm room designed to help you adjust gradually to the heat. Steam curls lazily in the air. You gingerly sit on the stone bench, grateful at least for the warm air soothing your tired muscles, but relaxation proves elusive. The next step, the caldarium, awaits. This is Rome's hottest bath. It's steamy, crowded, and extremely humid. Romans lounged here, chatting animatedly or discussing politics, their voices echoing off tiled walls. You gingerly enter the water, wincing slightly at the heat. Nearby, someone enthusiastically debates taxes, splashing water to punctuate his point. Another man loudly complains about the price of olives. You close your eyes briefly, desperately missing modern privacy and quiet relaxation. A mainstream historical truth. Bathing in ancient Rome was communal, public, and central to daily life. Romans visited bathhouses not just to clean themselves, but to socialize, exercise, and even conduct business. The baths were affordable, open to all social classes, and a vital part of Roman community and identity. Privacy simply wasn't part of the experience. Your next challenge, actually cleaning yourself. Romans didn't use soap like modern bathers. Instead, they rubbed scented olive oil all over their skin, scraping away dirt and dead skin cells with a curved metal tool called a strigil. You stare dubiously at your own strigil, already dreading the scraping sensation. Nearby, a man vigorously scrapes his back, grimacing with effort. You reluctantly follow suit, slathering your skin with oil, then awkwardly scraping it off. It feels oddly satisfying, but also deeply uncomfortable. Bits of dirt and skin collect on your strigil, gross but effective. Around you, men and women gossip openly about personal matters, politics, and scandals. Romans loved gossip, and bathhouses were prime territory. You overhear snippets, someone's marriage troubles, a senator's scandalous affair, complaints about the emperor. Romans were shockingly open about personal topics, discussing them freely among strangers. Quirky historical tidbit. Bathhouses were so central to Roman life that many included snack bars, libraries, and exercise rooms. Wealthy Romans might spend hours here, bathing repeatedly, enjoying massages or snacks, and even conducting meetings. You glance around, briefly envying their casual confidence. Your bath experience, unfortunately, feels less relaxing and more exhausting. You finally rinse off, moving next to the frigidarium, a cold plunge bath intended to invigorate and close your pores after the heat. Romans loved this shocking contrast. You do not. You stand at the edge of the cold pool, staring apprehensively. Nearby, a muscular Roman jumps in casually, splashing you slightly. He emerges, grinning broadly, invigorated. You reluctantly follow, gasping sharply at the icy shock. Shivering, you step quickly from the frigidarium, reaching for your towel. But there's another hurdle. You must pass through the exercise yard, palestra, first. Romans often exercised nude here, wrestling or lifting weights openly. You hurry past, eyes firmly forward, silently marveling at their lack of modesty. Dressing again in the crowded apoditerium proves just as awkward. Your toga tangles stubbornly again, your body slightly damp and oily. You blush furiously, wishing desperately for a private changing stall. Romans laugh and chat around you, entirely unconcerned by your embarrassment. Finally dressed, you emerge from the baths. Cleaner, yes, but exhausted by the awkwardness and forced intimacy. Romans found this daily ritual entirely normal, even pleasant. You, however, long desperately for your private bathroom at home, complete with modern comforts, soap, shampoo, actual towels. Stepping back into Rome's chaotic streets, you briefly consider whether today's bathhouse ordeal was worth it. Probably not. But here in ancient Rome, bathing publicly is simply unavoidable, a daily test of modesty, social skill, and endurance. You shake your head slightly, walking slowly back into the bustling city. Tomorrow, you'll do it all over again. The awkwardness, the scraping, the relentless chatter. Because surviving ancient Rome means adapting to its daily humiliations, one uncomfortable bath at a time. After surviving Rome's bustling streets and enduring the awkward spectacle of public baths, you might imagine the next step in your ancient Roman day would at least offer some privacy. Unfortunately, you'd be spectacularly wrong, because now you face an even more daunting challenge: Rome's public toilets. Prepare yourself. This will not be glamorous. You approach the latrina, Rome's communal restroom, already grimacing at the thought. Romans, famously advanced in so many ways, were shockingly indifferent about toilet privacy. The latrina is essentially a long stone bench with holes cut at regular intervals, built over continuously flowing water that washes away waste. Practical, yes. Private, absolutely not. Inside, the room hums with activity. Romans chat casually, laughing, gossiping, and even conducting business while perched comfortably, elbow to elbow, doing their morning business. There are no stalls, no dividers, no semblance of personal space. Romans, apparently, found this entirely normal. You, however, cringe deeply. You choose a spot reluctantly, eyes firmly fixed ahead, trying desperately not to acknowledge your neighbors. One man loudly discusses gladiator matches, enthusiastically describing the latest fight as if recounting a thrilling movie. Another discusses taxes, gesturing animatedly despite the awkward setting. Romans treated toilets as casual meeting spaces, chatting openly about politics, business, or scandal. Sitting awkwardly, you notice the sponge sticks available, Rome's alternative to toilet paper. Yes, you heard that correctly. Romans cleaned themselves with a communal sponge attached to a stick, rinsed in a bucket of vinegar or salt water after each use. Practical in theory, utterly horrifying in practice. You stare at the sponge stick skeptically, quietly grateful you thought ahead and brought your own personal wiping rag today. Mainstream historical fact: public toilets were common across ancient Roman cities, built with impressive engineering and drainage systems. However, privacy simply wasn't prioritized. Romans often spent significant time chatting and socializing in these communal spaces. The idea of embarrassment around bodily functions was practically non-existent in Roman culture. Nearby, someone loudly complains about his wife's cooking. Another jokes about politics, while a third man calmly dictates a letter to his scribe, who awkwardly balances his writing tablet nearby. Romans clearly believed productivity shouldn't stop even during bathroom breaks. You try desperately to hurry, feeling awkwardly exposed. But Rome's toilets were designed for comfort and leisurely visits. Long benches, open spaces, running water. Romans often lingered, chatting comfortably, entirely unbothered by public nudity or bodily functions. Your modern sensibilities, however, are deeply uncomfortable. Quirky historical tidbit: some Roman latrines featured murals or graffiti. Archaeologists have uncovered bathroom graffiti that ranges from crude jokes to political commentary, love declarations, and even philosophical thoughts. Romans apparently found inspiration even in bathrooms. Finished at last, you rinse your hands briefly in the running water provided, a rare nod toward hygiene, and hurriedly escape the latrina's embarrassing openness. Outside, you breathe deeply, grateful to be back in Rome's chaotic streets. Anything, it seems, is better than enduring the public toilets again. But your day isn't done. Rome's workday still awaits, filled with labor, challenges, and more social awkwardness. Privacy in ancient Rome is practically non-existent. Everything, bathing, toilets, even sleeping arrangements, is done publicly, communally. Romans thrived on social interaction, openness, and shared experiences. Your modern self craves solitude desperately, already exhausted by Rome's relentless sociability. You pause briefly, reflecting on your day so far. Breakfast was barely edible, streets chaotic, baths humiliating, and toilets horrifyingly public. Rome, for all its grandeur, is undeniably exhausting. You steel yourself, preparing to re-enter the bustling streets. You'll survive today, even if barely, learning slowly to navigate Rome's unique combination of brilliance, chaos, and public embarrassment. Just don't think too hard about the sponge stick. Some historical details, you decide, are definitely better left unremembered. Now that you've survived Rome's dubious toilets and the socially taxing baths, it's finally time to face another inevitable challenge: your daily grind. Work in ancient Rome isn't glamorous, comfortable, or even particularly fair. You won't find ping-pong tables or free snacks here. Instead, you'll endure long hours, demanding bosses, and the ever-present threat of punishment. If you're lucky enough to have a job, and luck in Rome is relative, your day begins early, often at sunrise, and drags on until sundown. There are no official breaks, no coffee runs, just relentless labor and constant supervision. Forget flexible hours or remote work. Here, your boss watches you constantly, ready to shout criticisms at the slightest mistake. You might find yourself employed as a craftsman, merchant's assistant, or laborer. Wealthy Romans often owned shops run by slaves or low-paid freedmen, with strict oversight ensuring no slacking off. Or perhaps you're a scribe, carefully copying documents by hand for hours, ink-stained fingers cramped painfully, eyes straining in dim lamplight. Mistakes are costly, both financially and physically. Romans valued discipline harshly. Mistakes meant fines, docked pay, or even physical punishment. Workers were frequently whipped or beaten for minor errors, tardiness, or simply annoying their employer. Your modern self shudders at such treatment. Romans shrugged it off as routine. You settle into your assigned task today. Perhaps lifting heavy crates of olive oil at a bustling market, your back aching by mid-morning. Or maybe you're cutting leather for sandals, fingers sore from repetitive motion. Regardless, your work is monotonous, physically taxing, and poorly compensated. Mainstream historical truth. Roman workers rarely had rights or protections. Employment was precarious, pay inconsistent, and hours exhausting. Slaves and freedmen performed most manual labor under harsh conditions, while poor citizens often scraped by with odd jobs or day labor. The glamorous vision of Rome rarely extended beyond elite villas. Around you, other workers perform tasks silently, faces expressionless, moving mechanically. Conversation is minimal. Supervisors dislike chatter, viewing it as distraction or rebellion. Occasionally, someone whispers a joke or complaint, glancing anxiously toward the boss. Romans had little concept of labor solidarity. Each person endured alone, quietly. A quirky historical tidbit. Roman workplaces often featured small shrines dedicated to specific gods or protective spirits. Workers left small offerings, coins, incense, bits of food, hoping divine favor might ease their day. Today, you notice a tiny shrine in the corner, decorated with wilted flowers and old bread crusts. You add a small coin, silently hoping the gods notice your suffering and offer mercy. Lunch, when it finally comes, is brief and disappointing. Romans rarely took lengthy breaks. You eat quickly, standing or squatting near your workstation, chewing stale bread and drinking watered-down wine. Occasionally, a vendor offers cheap sausages or olives nearby, food quality dubious, but hunger makes you brave. You risk a sausage, grimacing slightly at its questionable flavor. After lunch, work resumes relentlessly. Afternoon hours drag slowly, muscles protesting, mind numbing from repetitive tasks. Romans had little concept of ergonomics or workplace safety. Injuries were common, and workers either continued despite pain or risked unemployment and destitution. You briefly imagine modern luxuries, a comfortable office chair, a coffee machine, or just simple human decency. Rome offers none of these. Instead, it provides physical exhaustion, social isolation, and constant anxiety about punishment. Finally, the sun lowers toward the horizon, signaling the day's end. Your back aches deeply, fingers cramped, mind fogged by exhaustion. You gather your belongings silently, nodding briefly to co-workers equally drained. No camaraderie here, just mutual exhaustion. You step onto Rome's streets again, breathing deeply. Despite the chaos and noise outside, the streets suddenly feel inviting compared to your oppressive workplace. You stretch briefly, grimacing slightly at strained muscles, already dreading tomorrow's repetition. But survival in Rome demands persistence. Tomorrow, you'll rise again at dawn, perform exhausting labor, endure harsh supervisors, and eat disappointing meals. Romans expected nothing else from life. You sigh, slowly walking toward your apartment, determined to survive another day. In ancient Rome, simply existing required constant endurance, adaptability, and quiet resilience. And though you're exhausted now, you know tomorrow you'll face Rome's harsh realities again, because survival leaves no room for quitting. With your workday finally behind you, exhausting, tedious, and thankless as it was, it's time to grab a quick midday meal. Romans called this snack prandium, and although you might expect something substantial to keep you going, this meal usually disappoints. Think less lunch, more uninspired snack break. You shuffle tiredly to one of Rome's ubiquitous food stalls, called thermopolia. These are essentially the ancient equivalents of fast food joints, small counters with jars sunk into them, filled with pre-made dishes, warmed over low fires. It's quick, cheap, and utterly lacking in culinary inspiration. Today's options aren't thrilling. Stale bread, boiled chickpeas, cheap olives, a suspicious meat stew, and some limp vegetables soaked in oil. You eye the stew warily, its contents unclear and scent strongly fishy. Deciding caution is wise. You opt for bread and olives instead, handing over a few coins and receiving your small portion wrapped in a leaf. You eat standing up, leaning awkwardly against the stall's counter, surrounded by fellow Romans similarly tired and hungry. There's no leisurely lunch hour here, just a hurried, unsatisfying bite between tasks. You tear off chunks of bread, dipping them in the oily residue left from your olives, chewing mechanically. Taste is irrelevant. Calories are essential. Mainstream historical fact: lunch, prandium, in ancient Rome was generally small and simple, often leftovers, bread, cheese, fruit, or vegetables. Wealthy Romans might enjoy a slightly better meal, but common workers rarely had time or money for extravagance. Food was fuel, not pleasure, and lunch was strictly functional. Around you, Romans eat quickly, barely pausing in conversation. Workers grumble quietly about bosses, deadlines, or aching muscles. Merchants discuss sales and prices, debating loudly about olives or fish. You overhear snippets of gossip: a senator's scandalous affair, a merchant's shady deals, someone's noisy neighbors. Romans loved gossip almost as much as gladiators. Nearby, children beg scraps from passers-by, wide-eyed and persistent. Rome's streets teemed with poverty. Orphans, beggars, displaced people, all surviving on the margins, relying on charity or theft. You quietly hand over your leftover olives to a grateful child, silently grateful your own situation isn't quite so dire. A quirky historical tidbit: Romans frequently ate garum, a fermented fish sauce, at lunch, adding intense flavor and smell to simple dishes. Garum was so popular that different regions produced their own distinct recipes, fiercely debating quality and flavor. You wrinkle your nose, deciding today's bland bread is preferable to garum's pungent kick. You finish quickly, brushing crumbs from your toga, already dreading returning to work. Lunch hasn't rejuvenated you. It merely briefly quieted your hunger. Your stomach protests slightly, unhappy with the disappointing meal. You sigh softly, resigning yourself to more long hours ahead. As you step away, you notice another stall nearby selling something sweeter: honey cakes, figs, and dried fruits. Your mouth waters briefly, tempted. But treats were rarely affordable for ordinary Romans, reserved instead for festivals or special occasions. You walk reluctantly past, promising yourself an indulgence someday. Walking back toward your afternoon tasks, you pass busy Romans eating similarly hurried lunches. Food stalls crowd street corners, quickly handing out small meals to workers rushing through their days. Romans rarely lingered over lunch, preferring efficiency to leisure. You silently envy those wealthier Romans who ate leisurely at home, enjoying better food and relaxed conversation. But survival in ancient Rome meant embracing disappointment regularly: bland food, uncomfortable work, constant exhaustion. Romans rarely expected more, adapting quickly to daily hardships and frustrations. Today, your disappointing lunch fits seamlessly into your Roman experience. You sigh slightly, shoulders slumping in resignation, heading determinedly toward your workplace. Rome demanded endurance, resilience, and persistent hope, despite daily disappointments. And though your lunch left much to be desired, it was enough. enough to keep you going, enough to get through today, enough to survive Rome's constant challenges. Sometimes, in ancient Rome, simply being enough was all you could ask for. After your hurried, unsatisfying lunch, you venture toward the heart of Rome, the Forum. This bustling center of civic life is Rome's town square, marketplace, courthouse, and public debate arena rolled into one chaotic, noisy space. You brace yourself, because the Forum isn't for the faint-hearted or those craving peace and quiet. Approaching the Forum, you're immediately overwhelmed by sheer noise. Vendors shout enthusiastically, merchants argue passionately about prices, senators loudly debate politics, philosophers pontificate endlessly, and lawyers dramatically plead cases. The noise is relentless, a constant swirling cacophony of raised voices and clashing opinions. You take a deep breath, stepping hesitantly into the chaos. The Forum itself is impressive. Marble columns tower overhead, temples gleam grandly, statues gaze sternly. Rome's political heart beats here, alive with endless activity. But beneath its polished grandeur lies messy humanity, shouting, jostling, sweating, arguing, laughing. Romans loved their public debates and spectacle. The Forum is their stage, audience, and judge. Mainstream historical fact: Rome's Forum was the city's political, legal, and commercial center, hosting speeches, debates, trials, and business negotiations. Citizens gathered daily to discuss politics, philosophy, or gossip, while vendors sold everything from jewelry to olives. The Forum symbolized Rome's bustling civic life, combining grandeur with everyday messiness. You weave cautiously through crowds gathered around a particularly animated senator. He gestures dramatically, voice echoing powerfully, as he denounces rival policies. His audience shouts encouragement or insults, depending on their allegiance. Romans openly debated politics, passions running high, emotions always on display. Nearby, philosophers lecture earnestly, attracting smaller but equally passionate audiences. Rome's Forum regularly hosted philosophical discussions, with thinkers loudly debating morality, virtue, or the meaning of life. You briefly pause, listening to an elderly philosopher argue passionately about happiness. Romans loved philosophy, provided it involved animated debates and passionate arguments. Quirky historical tidbit: Roman orators often employed dramatic gestures, emotional appeals, and powerful voices during Forum speeches. Rhetoric was prized, and politicians carefully practiced techniques to sway audiences emotionally. Romans considered effective public speaking essential for political and social success. Moving cautiously, you reach the Forum's bustling marketplace. Merchants shout aggressively, advertising wares, fine pottery, questionable jewelry, exotic spices, cheap trinkets. Romans were passionate consumers, and the Forum offered endless temptations. You eye the jewelry skeptically, deciding the cheap gold rings seem suspiciously bronze-colored. Nearby, farmers loudly hawk fresh produce: olives, figs, apples, onions. You briefly consider buying figs, tempted by their sweetness. But prices are steep, merchants loudly insisting on quality and freshness. Romans loved bargaining fiercely, arguing passionately about prices and quality. You quickly realize you lack Roman negotiating skills, deciding instead to simply admire from a distance. Walking carefully, you pass heated legal trials. Lawyers plead dramatically, clients weep openly, jurors listen intently. Rome's justice system involved public trials, with cases passionately argued before large crowds. Romans loved courtroom drama, justice combined with theater. You pause briefly, impressed by a lawyer's emotional appeal, delivered convincingly enough to sway the crowd's sympathy. As you move through the forum's chaos, you realize Romans thrived on constant interaction, debates, discussions, arguments, drama. Privacy or quiet contemplation was rare. Romans lived publicly, openly, loudly. Your modern self craves quiet desperately, but Rome provides none. Exhausted by noise and crowds, you eventually retreat from the forum's relentless activity, stepping gratefully toward quieter streets. The forum symbolizes Rome perfectly, grand yet chaotic, impressive yet overwhelming. Romans found energy and inspiration in its constant activity. You, however, feel utterly drained. Yet surviving Rome means adapting quickly. Tomorrow you'll return again to the forum's chaos, debating merchants, shouting senators, dramatic lawyers. Rome demands constant participation, relentless interaction. Quiet, privacy, solitude. Those remain modern luxuries Rome simply refuses. You sigh, shaking your head slightly. Surviving ancient Rome requires endurance, patience, and a very high tolerance for noise and drama. Today, you've managed, barely, and tomorrow, you'll face the forum's chaos again, because in ancient Rome, survival means embracing public spectacle daily. After the deafening chaos of the forum, you find yourself dealing with a nagging headache, a sore throat from shouting over crowds, and a lingering cough that stubbornly won't disappear. In modern times, you'd pop a few painkillers and maybe grab some cough syrup. But in ancient Rome, medical care is a whole different, and frankly terrifying, story. Feeling miserable enough to seek medical attention, you reluctantly head toward Rome's equivalent of a clinic, usually a small storefront managed by a local doctor, or medicus. Forget sterile hospitals and reassuring professionalism. Roman medicine blends dubious practices, questionable ingredients, and doctors whose confidence often surpasses actual knowledge. Stepping into the medicus's shop, you're immediately hit by pungent smells, dried herbs, strong spices, vinegar, and something distinctly animal-related. The shelves are packed with ceramic jars filled with powders, liquids, dried plants, and substances you'd rather not identify. Your anxiety spikes, quickly realizing ancient medicine isn't exactly reassuringly clinical. The medicus himself greets you enthusiastically, dressed simply but confidently, a friendly smile hiding medical practices that would horrify any modern patient. Romans trusted doctors based on reputation and charisma, rather than medical training or scientific knowledge. Your medicus smiles reassuringly, confident he can cure your ailments despite limited medical understanding. You describe your headache and cough nervously, hoping desperately he'll offer simple advice, maybe rest, water, or soothing herbs. Instead, the medicus enthusiastically suggests bloodletting, explaining cheerfully that excess blood causes illness. Romans widely believed bloodletting restored bodily balance, despite the obvious risks. Your modern mind recoils at the idea. Ancient Romans accepted it calmly. Mainstream historical truth. Roman medicine relied heavily on theories like the four humors, believing illness resulted from imbalances in bodily fluids: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, black bile. Doctors attempted cures by restoring balance, often through invasive methods like bloodletting, purging, or bizarre diets. You politely decline bloodletting, nervously asking about alternatives. The medicus nods thoughtfully, rummaging through shelves and pulling out various jars, describing each substance enthusiastically. Romans treated coughs and headaches with peculiar remedies: ground mouse brains, dried lizards, animal dung, and other disturbing ingredients, all blended into foul-smelling concoctions. Quirky historical tidbit: Roman physicians often prescribed bizarre remedies involving animal ingredients, pig fat for inflammation, dried dung for skin problems, crushed insects for fevers. Roman patients cheerfully swallowed remedies modern patients would refuse outright. Your medicus proudly recommends dried beetles crushed into vinegar as an effective cough remedy. You stare at the beetle concoction dubiously, stomach churning slightly. The medicus insists earnestly, praising its proven effectiveness. Ancient Romans accepted such treatments calmly, trusting medical advice despite questionable ingredients. You hesitate briefly, deciding coughing slightly longer feels preferable to drinking beetle juice. Finally, you compromise, accepting herbal tea instead. The medicus seems mildly disappointed, clearly convinced beetles offered better results. He prepares tea quickly, blending herbs like thyme, sage, and honey, ingredients still used today. The tea tastes surprisingly pleasant, offering temporary relief. You relax slightly, grateful for simpler options. As you sip your tea, the medicus enthusiastically describes other medical theories and practices, unaware he's terrifying you further. Romans performed surgeries without anesthesia, treating broken bones with aggressive methods. Your modern self silently thanks fate for simpler ailments today. Ancient Rome's medical options were often worse than illnesses themselves. Eventually, you leave the medicus's shop feeling slightly better, but also deeply grateful your visit didn't involve bloodletting or beetle remedies. Roman medicine combined genuine care with dubious methods, doctors genuinely attempting cures despite limited understanding. Surviving illness in Rome required bravery, trust, and occasionally blind luck. Stepping onto Rome's bustling streets again, you breathe deeply, relieved. Today, you survived Roman medicine's dubious treatments, barely. Tomorrow, you'll carefully avoid further medical visits, desperately hoping your cough improves independently. Ancient Rome offered brilliant architecture, impressive culture, and notoriously terrifying healthcare. But survival here means constant adaptation, embracing daily discomforts and strange traditions. Today, you managed Rome's medical horrors. Tomorrow, hopefully, just rest and herbal tea. Your day in Rome has been challenging enough: questionable food, humiliating baths, terrifying medical treatments. But now comes perhaps your biggest cultural hurdle yet: Roman entertainment. Forget leisurely Netflix nights or relaxing podcasts. Ancient Romans preferred entertainment that was brutal, dramatic, and often shockingly violent. Tonight, you're attending a gladiator match at the amphitheater, and spoiler, it's not for the faint-hearted. As you approach Rome's enormous amphitheater, the Colosseum, it looms impressively overhead, massive stone walls dwarfing everything nearby. Romans flock here regularly, eagerly anticipating bloodshed, spectacle, and dramatic entertainment. The amphitheater's size and grandeur impress you, but the brutality awaiting inside fills you with dread. Entering, you're immediately surrounded by excited Romans, families, senators, merchants, all cheerfully chatting, placing bets, anticipating upcoming violence. The air buzzes with enthusiasm, anticipation palpable. Romans saw gladiator matches as thrilling spectacle. Heroic fighters, exotic animals, spectacular battles. You quietly question their enthusiasm, deeply uncomfortable. You find your seat, hard stone benches packed tightly, Romans pressed shoulder to shoulder, excited voices echoing loudly. Vendors roam aisles, selling snacks, wine, and souvenirs enthusiastically. Romans enjoyed gladiator matches as communal events, part entertainment, part socializing, part thrilling brutality. Mainstream historical fact: gladiator matches were hugely popular Roman entertainment, drawing massive crowds regularly. Matches featured combat between trained fighters, gladiators using swords, nets, tridents, and other weapons. Romans loved dramatic battles, elaborate spectacles, exotic animals, and violent conclusions, often resulting in severe injury or death. The event begins dramatically, musicians playing loudly, announcers shouting introductions, gladiators entering dramatically, dressed elaborately, weapons gleaming dangerously. Romans cheer enthusiastically, excitedly identifying favorite fighters, loudly placing bets. You watch nervously, feeling increasingly queasy. The first match begins, two gladiators facing off intensely. Romans cheer enthusiastically, urging fighters forward eagerly. Combat is swift, brutal, metal clashing violently, fighters grunting with exertion. You cringe slightly, deeply uncomfortable, witnessing real violence firsthand. Nearby, Romans enthusiastically discuss fighting techniques, analyzing skillfully executed moves or missed opportunities. Gladiator matches were carefully choreographed, gladiators highly trained professionals who combined combat skill with showmanship. Romans enjoyed analyzing fights intellectually, passionately debating strategies. A quirky historical tidbit: gladiators enjoyed celebrity status, admired for combat skill, bravery, charisma. Romans idolized successful gladiators, cheering favorite fighters enthusiastically, often celebrating victories publicly. Gladiators' dramatic entrances, elaborate costumes, and skillful fighting captivated Roman audiences passionately. The match continues dramatically, fighters exchanging blows intensely, audience cheering louder, excitement escalating rapidly. Eventually, one gladiator emerges victorious, opponent severely injured. Romans cheer enthusiastically, winner dramatically saluting audience. You applaud half-heartedly, stomach churning uncomfortably. Next, animals enter the arena: lions, bears, elephants, displayed dramatically. Romans enjoyed animal spectacles, thrilled by exotic creatures battling gladiators or each other. You watch nervously, dreading inevitable brutality. Romans cheer enthusiastically, thrilled by spectacle and violence. As animals fight brutally, audience excitement escalates dramatically. Romans shout enthusiastically, applauding particularly dramatic moments. Battles fiercely intense, injuries severe. You watch, feeling increasingly queasy, deeply uncomfortable witnessing animals suffering. Romans remain enthusiastically captivated. Eventually, gladiator matches conclude dramatically. Final battles fiercely brutal, audience cheering passionately. Romans applaud enthusiastically, discussing favorite moments animatedly. You sigh deeply. Relieved matches ended, feeling drained emotionally. Exiting amphitheater, Romans continue excitedly discussing spectacle, favorite gladiators, dramatic battles, impressive animals. You remain quiet, uncomfortable witnessing Rome's brutal entertainment firsthand. Romans clearly loved gladiator matches passionately, violent spectacle deeply ingrained culturally. Walking slowly toward home, you reflect quietly. Ancient Rome offered brilliant architecture, sophisticated culture, and disturbingly brutal entertainment. Gladiator matches showcased Rome's complex culture dramatically. Impressive spectacle combined disturbingly with brutal violence. You sigh softly, exhausted emotionally. Surviving ancient Rome required constant adaptation, enduring cultural discomforts, tolerating brutal entertainment. Today, you survived gladiator matches, barely. Tomorrow, you'll avoid further matches carefully, quietly appreciating modern entertainment's peaceful simplicity. In ancient Rome, surviving entertainment meant tolerating violence regularly, adapting culturally, enduring emotionally. Today, you survived gladiator matches' brutality. But tomorrow, hopefully, simpler pleasures. Finally, stepping away from the deafening roar of Rome's gladiator matches, you long for nothing more than the comforting sanctuary of your home. You imagine closing the door behind you, the gentle hush enveloping you, maybe relaxing into a cozy chair as silence washes away the stress of your day. But unfortunately, ancient Rome has other ideas. Your home, like the vast majority of ordinary Romans, is a crowded apartment called an insula. Far from a peaceful sanctuary, your apartment building is essentially an ancient urban jungle, noisy, cramped, and constantly chaotic. Privacy? Forget it. Quiet? Impossible. Comfort? Merely a hopeful fantasy. As you approach your apartment, the cacophony begins before you even step inside. Voices drift from every direction. Arguments, laughter, crying children, gossiping neighbors, someone loudly reciting poetry badly. Walls are thin enough to hear every intimate detail of your neighbors' lives, whether you want to or not. Inside your tiny apartment, it's immediately clear why Romans rarely spent much time at home if they could help it. Your living space is cramped, poorly lit by sputtering oil lamps, and cluttered with sparse furniture, a bed, a couple stools, maybe a chest for clothing. You share this tiny space with extended family, perhaps your elderly parents, a couple of siblings, or distant relatives, and probably even a random lodger or two. Personal space is non-existent. Living arrangements are more like dorm rooms than cozy homes. You carefully navigate the crowded rooms, tripping over a sleeping child and narrowly dodging a family member, waving their arms wildly during an argument. In ancient Rome, family arguments were conducted openly and loudly, emotions freely expressed without embarrassment. You silently envy modern standards of indoor voices and private conversations. Mainstream historical fact. Most Romans, except the very wealthy, lived in crowded apartments called insulae. These buildings were typically 3 to 6 stories high, packed with small rooms rented by families or groups. Rooms were minimal, often damp, poorly ventilated, and extremely prone to fires. Privacy was virtually non-existent, noise relentless, and comfort minimal. You realize quickly that cooking at home is nearly impossible. Apartments rarely had kitchens due to fire hazards and space constraints. Instead, Romans relied on street vendors or communal ovens. Your evening meal today is likely leftovers from street food stalls, stale bread, leftover stew, or olives. It's hardly appetizing, but it's better than nothing. You eat standing or perched awkwardly on your bed, balancing a plate precariously. The noise level escalates further during dinner as neighbors simultaneously argue, laugh, shout, and even sing loudly and off-key. Children run and scream freely through hallways, their laughter and arguments echoing through thin walls. Romans were famously indulgent of noisy children, rarely enforcing discipline. Your modern self struggles with the relentless noise. Romans merely shrugged and accepted it as part of daily life. A quirky historical tidbit. Apartment buildings were notoriously dangerous. Fires were common, structures unstable, collapses frequent. Landlords rarely invested in maintenance, and safety measures were virtually non-existent. Ancient Roman apartments were regularly destroyed by fires, and tenants lived constantly aware of these dangers, yet had no choice but to remain in precarious homes. You briefly consider sleep, exhausted from your day's relentless demands. But sleep in ancient Rome's insulae is rarely peaceful. Walls are thin, noises constant, and beds uncomfortable. Roman beds were simple wooden frames stuffed with straw or wool, scratchy, lumpy, and prone to attracting insects. You lie down reluctantly, already itching, uncomfortable, and dreading the night ahead. Nearby, neighbors continue arguing loudly, their voices clearly audible through paper-thin walls. Outside, street noises persist, dogs barking incessantly, carts rumbling loudly across uneven cobblestones, drunken Romans shouting or singing loudly. Your modern self desperately craves quiet and solitude. Ancient Rome provides neither. You toss and turn restlessly, unable to block out noise or discomfort. Ancient Romans adapted to constant noise, minimal comfort, limited privacy, but your modern self struggles profoundly. You silently envy modern conveniences, soundproof walls, comfortable beds, private homes. Ancient Roman life demanded constant endurance, adaptation, and resilience. Finally, exhausted from relentless noise and discomfort, you drift briefly into fitful sleep. Dreams are interrupted by loud arguments, barking dogs, rumbling carts. Rome's relentless noise infiltrating even your subconscious mind. Your sleep is shallow, restless, filled with stress and discomfort. As dawn slowly approaches, you awake exhausted and aching, longing desperately for peaceful sleep and private comfort. But Rome demands endurance, resilience, constant adaptation to relentless chaos, noise, and minimal comfort. You sigh deeply, preparing yourself mentally for another exhausting day ahead. You realize clearly, ancient Rome, for all its impressive achievements, offers little comfort, minimal peace, and constant challenges. Romans adapted and endured. Modern visitors struggle profoundly. You silently marvel at Romans' remarkable resilience, enduring relentless discomfort daily. Yet tomorrow, you'll rise again at dawn, face Rome's relentless challenges, endure constant discomfort, adapt continuously. Because surviving ancient Rome meant constant endurance, quiet resilience, and relentless adaptation to daily chaos and noise. Tonight, you barely managed Rome's relentless chaos and noise, surviving minimally. Tomorrow, you'll endure again, quietly marveling at Romans' impressive resilience and remarkable endurance. Surviving ancient Rome is exhausting, challenging, uncomfortable, but Romans endured daily. You silently admire Romans' impressive resilience, marveling quietly at their daily endurance. Tonight, exhausted and uncomfortable, you briefly dream of modern comforts, quiet homes, peaceful sleep, private comforts. But ancient Rome remains relentlessly noisy, crowded, uncomfortable. And tomorrow, you'll endure again, quietly resilient, relentlessly adapting. Because surviving ancient Rome demands constant endurance, impressive resilience, and relentless adaptation. Tonight, you survived Rome's relentless chaos. Barely. Tomorrow, you'll endure again, quietly admiring Romans' remarkable resilience amidst daily discomfort and relentless noise. Survival here means relentless adaptation, quiet resilience, constant endurance. Tonight, exhausted by relentless noise and discomfort, you quietly marvel at ancient Romans' remarkable endurance, silently admiring their daily resilience and relentless adaptability. Because surviving ancient Rome means enduring relentless noise, constant discomfort, minimal privacy. Romans endured daily. Your modern self quietly marvels at their remarkable resilience and relentless adaptation. Tonight, you survive minimally, quietly longing for modern comforts. Tomorrow, you'll endure again, quietly resilient, relentlessly adapting. Because surviving ancient Rome demands constant endurance amidst relentless noise and minimal comfort. Romans adapted daily. Your modern self quietly marvels at their impressive resilience. Having endured another restless night in your cramped, noisy Roman apartment, you wake to yet another distinctly uncomfortable reality: love, dating, and marriage in ancient Rome. Forget romantic candle-lit dinners or long walks on the beach. Roman relationships were practical, heavily negotiated, and often deeply awkward. Stepping into Rome's dating world is like entering a complicated marketplace. Love was rarely the main consideration. Marriage was primarily a practical arrangement involving property, status, and family alliances. Romantic affection was secondary, often entirely absent. Your modern self craves romance and compatibility. Romans valued practicality and social status above all. If you're unmarried, dating is heavily chaperoned and rigorously supervised. Forget casual dates or romantic spontaneity. Meetings between potential spouses were usually carefully arranged by parents or professional matchmakers. Dates typically involved stiff conversations in your parents' home, awkward small talk under strict parental supervision. Privacy? Impossible. Romance? Unlikely. Your parents, particularly your father, hold absolute authority over your marital choices. Fathers arranged marriages, negotiated dowries, and chose partners for practical benefits. You had limited say. Obedience and acceptance were expected. Your modern self finds this oppressive and frustrating. Romans considered it entirely normal. Mainstream historical fact: ancient Roman marriages were primarily practical alliances. Fathers selected spouses for children, focusing on wealth, family connections, social advancement. Dowries were negotiated carefully. Romantic love was rarely prioritized. Marriage was seen as a duty, an economic and social contract, rather than a personal choice based on love. If you're already married, your marital life likely focuses heavily on household duties and raising children. Romance rarely plays a role. Married life is practical, functional, and often emotionally distant. Spouses had distinct roles. Husbands worked, managed finances, held public roles. Wives managed homes, raised children, and fulfilled household duties. Interaction between spouses often felt formal, restrained, emotionally distant. Your husband or wife was usually selected primarily for practical reasons: family alliances, property gains, social status. Emotional connection was secondary, developing gradually or sometimes never. Your modern self craves emotional intimacy. Roman marriages often remained emotionally distant, practically focused, socially advantageous, but rarely affectionate. A quirky historical tidbit: Roman wedding ceremonies involved elaborate rituals, including symbolic actions like exchanging rings, joining hands, and symbolic fire rituals. Brides wore elaborate dresses, veils, and special hairstyles. Weddings were festive community events involving feasting, processions, music, and public celebrations. Romans enjoyed weddings as lively celebrations. Marriages themselves were primarily practical arrangements. If unmarried, your dating experiences involve awkward meetings under strict parental supervision. Potential spouses are assessed carefully. Financial stability, family connections, property holdings. Conversations often feel like job interviews rather than romantic meetings. Romans prioritized practicality, social status, and financial stability above romance or personal compatibility. If married, daily marital life feels heavily focused on duties and responsibilities. Romance and affection rarely feature prominently. Marriages are practical alliances, household management partnerships, child-rearing arrangements. Your modern self craves emotional connection. Romans valued practicality and stability above emotional intimacy. Divorce was common but complex. Legal processes involved property negotiations, custody arrangements, public scrutiny. Romans divorced frequently for various reasons: infidelity, incompatibility, property disputes. Divorce carried social stigma, yet remained relatively accessible, allowing unhappy marriages to dissolve relatively easily. As you navigate Rome's complicated relationship dynamics, you quietly marvel at Romans' acceptance of practical, emotionally distant marriages. Your modern self struggles profoundly, craving romance, compatibility, emotional intimacy. Romans adapted calmly, prioritizing practicality, social stability, family alliances above emotional connection. Dating and marriage in ancient Rome involved constant negotiation, careful arrangements, strict parental oversight. Romantic affection remained secondary. Practicality and social status mattered most. Your modern self longs desperately for romantic intimacy. Romans accepted practicality and stability calmly. Surviving ancient Rome's dating and marriage realities required constant adaptation, quiet resilience, acceptance of emotionally distant, practically focused relationships. Romans adapted calmly, prioritizing stability above romance. Your modern self quietly struggles profoundly. Tonight, exhausted emotionally by Rome's practical, distant relationship dynamics, you quietly long desperately for romantic intimacy. Tomorrow, you'll endure again, quietly resilient, accepting Rome's emotionally distant relationships calmly. Because surviving ancient Rome demanded constant adaptation, acceptance of emotionally distant relationships. Romans adapted calmly, prioritizing practicality and stability above romance. Your modern self quietly struggles profoundly, craving emotional connection desperately. Yet survival in ancient Rome required relentless adaptation, quiet resilience, acceptance of practically focused, emotionally distant relationships. Romans adapted calmly. Your modern self struggles profoundly. Tonight, emotionally exhausted by Rome's relationship realities, you quietly long desperately for romantic intimacy and emotional connection. Tomorrow, you'll endure again, quietly resilient, accepting Rome's practical relationships calmly. Because surviving ancient Rome demanded constant adaptation, relentless acceptance of emotionally distant relationships, Romans adapted calmly. Your modern self struggles profoundly, quietly craving emotional intimacy. Tonight, exhausted emotionally, you quietly marvel at Romans' resilience and adaptability, accepting practically focused relationships calmly. Your modern self longs desperately for emotional connection. Ancient Rome offers practicality instead. Yet tomorrow, you'll endure again, quietly resilient, adapting constantly to Rome's emotionally distant relationship realities. Because surviving ancient Rome demanded relentless adaptation, quiet acceptance of practically focused relationships. Romans adapted calmly. Your modern self struggles profoundly, quietly craving emotional intimacy. Tonight, emotionally exhausted, you quietly marvel at Romans' resilience and adaptability, accepting practical, emotionally distant relationships calmly. Tomorrow, you'll endure again, quietly resilient, adapting constantly to ancient Rome's emotionally distant, practically focused relationships. Because surviving ancient Rome meant constant adaptation, relentless acceptance of emotionally distant relationships. Romans adapted calmly. Your modern self struggles profoundly, quietly craving emotional intimacy. Having navigated the emotionally distant landscape of Roman dating and marriage, your exhausting Roman day now draws toward its final social hurdle: dinner. In modern life, dinner often means relaxing at home or casually dining out. In ancient Rome, dinner, or cena, was a dramatic, complicated social event, often uncomfortable, awkward, and decidedly unappetizing. Tonight, you attend a typical Roman banquet, prepared for an experience that's equal parts bizarre and stomach-turning. Roman dinners were formal, elaborate affairs involving multiple courses, exotic ingredients, and social etiquette designed to impress guests and display wealth. Forget casual meals. Roman dinners were meticulously staged performances, showcasing elaborate food, social hierarchy, and careful etiquette. Your modern self craves simple comfort. Roman dinners demand constant social alertness. You arrive at your host's villa, large, grand, elaborately decorated. Wealthy Romans hosted lavish banquets regularly, showcasing status and wealth. Entering, you're immediately overwhelmed by opulence: marble columns, frescoed walls, elaborate furniture. Servants bustle about, attending guests eagerly. You feel slightly awkward, intimidated by wealth and grandeur. Dinner guests recline on couches arranged around tables, resting on their sides, eating with one hand. Reclining while eating feels deeply uncomfortable. Your modern self struggles awkwardly, managing utensils carefully. Romans considered reclining elegant, comfortable. Your modern self finds it awkwardly challenging. Mainstream historical fact: Roman dinners, cena, involved elaborate meals, multiple courses, exotic ingredients, and careful social etiquette. Wealthy Romans hosted lavish banquets regularly, displaying social status and wealth. Meals included unusual foods: roasted dormice, flamingo tongues, fermented fish sauces, garum, intended to impress guests. The first courses appear dramatically, small, elaborate appetizers. You cautiously sample roasted dormice, tiny rodents delicately prepared, considered delicacies by Romans. Your stomach churns slightly. Romans eagerly consume delicately prepared rodents calmly. You swallow carefully, hoping desperately your discomfort remains unnoticed. Next, seafood dishes arrive dramatically: exotic fish, eel, oysters, delicately prepared and elaborately presented. Romans eagerly consume seafood delicacies calmly. Your modern palate struggles profoundly. You sample cautiously, silently, longing desperately for simpler foods: comforting pasta, familiar vegetables. Romans eagerly embrace culinary complexity. Your modern self struggles profoundly. A quirky historical tidbit: Roman dinners included bizarre foods designed deliberately to impress or shock guests: peacock, jellyfish, parrot tongues, even stuffed sow's udders. Romans eagerly consumed such foods calmly, impressed by culinary exoticism and status symbolism. Your modern self recoils silently, struggling profoundly with culinary discomfort. Main dishes arrive dramatically: roasted meats, elaborately seasoned, dramatically presented. Romans eagerly consume roasted meats calmly, impressed by culinary skill and exotic spices. You sample cautiously, stomach churning uncomfortably. Romans eagerly embrace culinary complexity. Your modern palate struggles profoundly, silently longing desperately for comforting simplicity. Social etiquette demands constant awareness. Conversation carefully navigated. Manners meticulously observed. Romans discussed politics, philosophy, gossip passionately, conversation lively, intellectually engaging yet socially exhausting. Your modern self craves casual comfort. Roman dinners demand constant social alertness. Desserts appear dramatically. Honey-soaked pastries, exotic fruits, delicately spiced sweets. Romans eagerly consume sweet delicacies calmly. Your modern palate finds comfort briefly, relieved by familiar sweetness amidst culinary complexity. Yet social demands persist. Conversation remains lively, intellectually engaging yet socially exhausting. Eventually, dinner concludes dramatically, servants clearing tables swiftly, guests discussing meal animatedly. Romans enjoyed dinner as elaborate social rituals, displaying wealth, engaging intellectually, embracing culinary complexity. Your modern self craves casual comfort. Roman dinners remain socially exhausting, intellectually engaging yet profoundly uncomfortable. Departing your host's villa, you breathe deeply. Relieved dinner's elaborate social demands ended finally. Your stomach churned slightly. Culinary discomfort profound. Roman dinners involved constant culinary complexity, social alertness, intellectual engagement. Your modern self struggles profoundly. Walking home slowly, you reflect quietly. Ancient Roman dinners involved culinary complexity, social rituals, intellectual engagement. Impressive yet profoundly exhausting. Romans eagerly embraced culinary exoticism, elaborate rituals, lively conversation. Your modern self craves simpler comforts profoundly. Tonight, exhausted socially and culinarily, you silently long desperately for comforting simplicity. Familiar foods, casual meals, quiet comfort. Ancient Roman dinners demanded constant social alertness, culinary complexity, intellectual engagement. Your modern self struggles profoundly, quietly craving simpler comforts desperately. Yet survival in ancient Rome required constant adaptation, quiet resilience, relentless acceptance of social demands, culinary complexity. Romans adapted eagerly. Your modern self struggles profoundly. Tonight, exhausted socially and culinarily, you quietly marvel at Romans' eager adaptability, relentless social engagement, constant acceptance of culinary complexity. Tomorrow, you'll endure again, quietly resilient, adapting constantly to Rome's relentless social demands, culinary complexity, intellectual engagement. Because surviving ancient Rome meant constant adaptation, quiet resilience, relentless acceptance of culinary complexity, social alertness, intellectual engagement. Romans adapted eagerly. Your modern self struggles profoundly. Tonight, exhausted profoundly, you silently marvel at Romans' eager adaptability, relentless acceptance of culinary complexity, constant social engagement. Tomorrow, you'll endure again, quietly resilient, adapting constantly. Because surviving ancient Rome required constant adaptation, quiet resilience, relentless acceptance of culinary complexity, social alertness, intellectual engagement. Romans adapted eagerly. Your modern self struggles profoundly. Tonight, exhausted socially and culinarily, you quietly long desperately for simpler comforts, familiar foods, casual meals, quiet relaxation. Ancient Roman dinners demanded constant adaptation, relentless social alertness, eager acceptance of culinary complexity. Yet tomorrow, you'll endure again, quietly resilient, adapting constantly, marveling quietly at Romans' relentless adaptability, eager acceptance of culinary complexity, constant social engagement. Because surviving ancient Rome required relentless adaptation, quiet resilience, eager acceptance of culinary complexity, constant social alertness, intellectual engagement. Romans adapted eagerly. Your modern self struggles profoundly. Tonight, exhausted profoundly, you silently marvel at Romans' relentless adaptability, eager acceptance of culinary complexity, constant social engagement. Tomorrow, you'll endure again, quietly resilient, adapting constantly, quietly marveling at Romans' eager adaptability, relentless acceptance of culinary complexity. After enduring a day packed with relentless Roman chaos, awkward baths, uncomfortable dining rituals, questionable food, and crowded, noisy streets, you finally approach your day's final challenge: bedtime. In modern life, bedtime often means cozy pajamas, peaceful silence, comfortable bedding, and blissful solitude. Ancient Rome offers none of these comforts. Prepare yourself. Bedtime here is noisy, uncomfortable, chaotic, and profoundly exhausting. You return home to your crowded apartment, your insula already humming loudly with constant activity. Your family, neighbors, and random tenants bustle noisily, oblivious to your desperate longing for quiet rest. Romans rarely slept peacefully. City noise, thin walls, constant interruptions defined nightly routines. Your sleeping area is minimal, simply a small wooden frame filled loosely with straw or wool. Beds were uncomfortable, scratchy, frequently infested with insects. You lie down, reluctantly, itching slightly, already uncomfortable, deeply dreading tonight's restless sleep. Outside, Rome's streets remain relentlessly noisy. Dogs barking incessantly, drunken Romans shouting or singing loudly, carts rattling across uneven cobblestones. Romans rarely enjoyed peaceful quiet. City life involved constant noise, relentless activity. Your modern self desperately craves silence. Rome offers none. Mainstream historical fact: Roman apartments, insulae, rarely offered comfortable sleeping conditions. Rooms were cramped, beds minimal, bedding scratchy. Walls were thin, offering no noise protection. Streets remained noisy constantly. Dogs barking, people shouting, carts rattling loudly. Romans adapted calmly. Your modern self struggles profoundly. You toss restlessly, noise and discomfort preventing peaceful sleep. Nearby, neighbors continue loudly arguing, thin walls offering no noise protection. Outside, street noise persists, dogs barking incessantly, drunken Romans shouting loudly. Your modern self desperately craves silence. Rome offers relentless noise instead. Occasionally, you drift briefly into restless sleep, dreams disturbed frequently by noise and discomfort. Romans adapted calmly to relentless noise and minimal comfort. Your modern self struggles profoundly. Sleep feels elusive, interrupted constantly by noise, itching discomfort, cramped sleeping conditions. A quirky historical tidbit: Romans frequently complained about street noise disrupting sleep. Roman writers mentioned noisy neighbors, barking dogs, drunken revelers interrupting nightly rest. Romans adapted calmly, accepting noise and discomfort as daily realities. Your modern self desperately craves silence and comfort instead. Eventually, dawn approaches slowly. Exhausted, you awake briefly, already dreading another relentless Roman day ahead. Your modern self struggles profoundly with relentless noise, minimal comfort, constant exhaustion. Romans adapted calmly. Your modern self quietly marvels at their remarkable resilience and relentless adaptability. Surviving ancient Rome required constant adaptation, relentless acceptance of minimal comfort, quiet resilience amidst relentless noise and daily exhaustion. Romans adapted eagerly. Your modern self struggles profoundly, quietly craving silence, comfort, peaceful sleep, desperately. Tonight, exhausted profoundly, you quietly marvel at Roman's remarkable resilience and relentless adaptability. Tomorrow, you'll endure again, quietly resilient, adapting constantly to Rome's relentless noise, minimal comfort, constant exhaustion. Because surviving ancient Rome meant relentless adaptation, quiet resilience, constant acceptance of noise and discomfort, Romans adapted eagerly. Your modern self struggles profoundly. You sigh softly, exhausted, silently longing desperately for peaceful sleep, comfortable bedding, quiet solitude. Yet ancient Rome provides relentless noise, minimal comfort, constant exhaustion instead. Tonight, exhausted profoundly, you quietly marvel at Roman's remarkable resilience, relentless adaptability, eager acceptance of noise and discomfort. Tomorrow you'll endure again, quietly resilient, adapting constantly to Rome's relentless challenges. Because surviving ancient Rome required relentless adaptation, quiet resilience, eager acceptance of noise, minimal comfort, constant exhaustion, Romans adapted calmly. Your modern self struggles profoundly. Tonight, profoundly exhausted, you silently marvel at Romans' relentless adaptability, quiet resilience amidst noise, discomfort, daily exhaustion. Tomorrow, you'll endure again, quietly resilient, adapting constantly to Rome's relentless challenges. Yet tonight, you drift briefly into restless sleep, exhausted profoundly by Rome's relentless noise, minimal comfort, constant daily exhaustion. Romans adapted calmly. Your modern self quietly marvels at their remarkable resilience and relentless adaptability. As your day finally fades into quiet darkness, you slowly relax, releasing your exhaustion gently. Tonight's relentless noise gradually softens, becoming distant background hum, street noises fading gently, voices calming softly, chaos dissolving peacefully into quiet. You breathe deeply, slowly relaxing, letting Rome's relentless demands fade quietly. Your muscles soften gently, tension releasing peacefully. Tonight, exhaustion finally eases, discomfort gently fading into restful quiet. Rome's relentless noise finally softens peacefully, becoming gentle, distant lullaby instead. You slowly drift gently, exhausted muscles relaxing peacefully. Rome's relentless demands gradually fade, becoming distant memories softly. Noise quiets gently. Discomfort fades softly. Exhaustion eases peacefully. Tonight, finally peaceful, you drift quietly into restful sleep, gently embracing quiet relaxation. Ancient Rome demanded relentless adaptation, quiet resilience, constant endurance. Romans adapted eagerly. Tonight, you gently marvel quietly at their remarkable resilience, relentless adaptability, constant acceptance of daily challenges. Yet now, finally peaceful, you drift gently, quiet relaxation easing exhaustion peacefully. Noise quiets gently, discomfort fades softly, exhaustion finally eases peacefully into quiet sleep. Tonight, gently restful, you quietly marvel at Roman's remarkable resilience amidst relentless challenges. Your modern self struggles profoundly, yet tonight, exhaustion finally eases gently into quiet restfulness. Tomorrow, you'll endure again, quietly resilient, adapting constantly to Rome's relentless challenges. Yet tonight, exhaustion finally eases gently into quiet, restful sleep. Your muscles relax peacefully, tension softly releasing, noise gently quieting. Tonight, finally peaceful, you drift gently into quiet restfulness, softly marveling quietly at Roman's remarkable resilience and relentless adaptability. Exhaustion eases gently, discomfort fades softly, noise quiets peacefully. Tonight, you gently rest quietly, exhaustion finally easing peacefully, noise softly quieting. Tomorrow, you'll endure again, quietly resilient, adapting constantly. Yet tonight, peacefully restful, exhaustion finally eases gently into quiet sleep.